Welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to have a look at this article that came out of Harvard University, this peer-reviewed publication titled New Genetic Research on Remote Pacific Islands Yields Surprising Findings on the World's Earliest Seafarers. So this article is very interesting because it's documented 5 new migration routes, as well as other information regarding the people and ancestry of the Pacific Islands. Let's just get started here. New genetic research from remote islands in the Pacific offers fresh insights into the ancestry and culture of the world's earliest seafarers, including family structure, social customs, and the ancestral populations of the people living there today. So here's a great map that they provided in the article. And you can see here, there's the Philippines, and then north of Australia, we have New Guinea, Melanesia, and Polynesia to the east. It's been long speculated that these people here have the same genetic marker as the ancient people in South America. For a long time now, there's been a lot of question and discussion about the origins of these people, what was going on during this period, and how seafaring was understandably a huge part of their culture and how their society worked in general. There's a lot of island hopping, and they went as far northwest or northeast rather to Hawaii. And so there's a lot going on here. These people are all related and they share genetic data, but some interesting things have been found in terms of how their culture was run. And it's rare to be able to derive cultural information from genetic information, but in this case, they are able to pull it off. And this is groundbreaking stuff. So moving along with the article, the work described in the journal Science, which is, if you guys don't know, a peer-reviewed research publication. So there are a lot of people who are involved in this study, and again, most of the best studies out there are the ones that feature multidisciplinary professionals, especially in fields like linguistics, archaeology, genetics, etc. So these huge teams, it's not uncommon for these teams to get together and get to work on long studies like this. Like I said earlier, 5 previously undocumented migrations into a sub-region of this area, and suggests that about 2,500 to 3,500 years ago, early inhabitants of these Pacific islands, including Guam and Vanuatu, had matrilocal population structures, where women almost always remained in their communities after marriage, while men more often moved out of their community to live with that of their wives. So traditionally speaking, especially in the West, women usually get married off into other families. But in this case, it's the men that go over to, in most cases, they'll go to other islands to marry into a different community, and the wives stay in one spot. This is what I was talking about earlier, cultural information coming out through the genetic studies. The practice is different from that of patrilocal societies, where women are overwhelmingly the ones that leave their own community. It supports the idea that the world's earliest seafarers were organized through female lineages. The results come from genome-wide analysis on 164 ancient individuals from 2,800 to 300 years ago, as well as 112 modern individuals. In terms of ancient people, that's actually a pretty huge sample size. All this genetic data happens within a window of about 3,100 years. Again, David Reich is, if you guys aren't familiar, he's one of the prominent figures in genetics as a field of study, and he's had a lot of input in theories such as the peopling of the Americas from the Bering Strait and other studies as well. It's an unexpected gift to be able to learn about cultural patterns from genetic data. These results suggest that the earliest seafarers' matrilocality was the rule, and that matrilocality, again, is what I was talking about before, that if you have a matrilocal society, then men are usually the ones that leave and go to other families, other villages. So here's a Google map image, just as an aside here. There are all of these, I don't know if you guys can see it, but these are, you can pull up Google Maps and you can zoom in yourself. But if you go here, there's hundreds of islands here. And back in the day, they had their vessels and they practiced, the earliest versions of these people practiced something called intervisibility. So the earliest ancestors, when they're scouting out an area, they'll just go to whatever they can see and they'll island hop, and that's basically how their culture was kind of molded, was through this practice. And it makes a lot of sense that people from New Guinea, and I mentioned earlier Hawaii, and there are now people from Asia, Taiwan, Philippines, Australasia, just all these people here, Tonga, this is such a vast area, but they all share similar genetics here. For the longest time, they thought it was only through only a select few routes that these genetics were flowing. But now they've just, not really out of nowhere, but if you're just reading the literature and this pops up, these 5 new streams of genetics coming into the region almost seems like it came out of nowhere, because 20 years ago, no one was really thinking about that. The genetic analysis compared early seafarers from Guam, Vanuatu, and Tonga, living about 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, revealing their mitochondrial DNA sequences, which humans only inherit from their mother, differed almost completely while sharing much more of the rest of their DNA. So what that means is, if you just look at all these different islands, in a matrilocal society, there would be a huge variation if you compared all the different islands of their mtDNA as compared to other parts of the DNA, like the Y chromosome DNA and such. So that means that since these women were, for the most part, staying home, then every woman from their respective islands, their DNA generally stayed in one spot. So that's why there's such variation, because there's so many islands. And that's not to say that women didn't go. Men and women did, if they were married or their families did travel together. There are instances of that. But for the vast majority, according to the DNA evidence, these were matrilocal societies. The only way this can happen is if migrants who left their communities and to marry into new ones were almost always males. This pattern of leaving the community must have been nearly unique to males in order to explain why genetic differentiation is so much higher in mitochondrial DNA than in the rest of the genome. The new study from this team of geneticists and archaeologists quintuples the body of ancient DNA data from the vast Pacific region called remote Oceania. And that's what I'm talking about here. This would be considered remote Oceania. Just all these scattered islands here. French Polynesia, the Cook Islands. Yeah, so a few things that came to my mind when I was reading this was, well, if we are indeed dealing with a culture that was so dependent on living along the coasts and sailing to and from different communities on these islands, to me, it makes a lot of sense that these seafaring culture people would take a boat and go to South America, because there are islands dotting the Pacific between this remote Oceania and South America, as well as Central and North America. You have like modern day Bora Bora, and then Easter Island, which again is along this, I guess, channel or these communities of islands. The dates are rather, in the grand scheme of things, these dates are rather recent, because we're talking only, in this article, they're saying only about 3,500 years ago or so. But, there are people with the genetic marker in South America that predates 3,500 years by even more thousands of years. So pre-Ice Age, essentially, for these people living in the Andes and parts of the deepest parts of the Amazon. It makes sense that the people who live in South America, who purportedly have this genetic marker from Polynesians and such, they come from a seafaring culture. That makes a lot of sense. So, it's an understatement to say that, it was a complex peopling of a major sub-region of the world. So here's something that I was just talking about before, it wasn't until after 3,500 years ago that humans began living in remote Oceania for the first time after developing the technology to cross open water in unique long-distance canoes. So people like Graham Hancock and other researchers, although this may be true in the archaeological record, it could be that that seafaring was perhaps rediscovered in this time, and maybe it wasn't just discovered this is the first time 3,500 years ago that people were sailing across bodies of water. Perhaps there's something that happened to where people stopped doing that, and then those traditions were carried on later. And the reason why that should be noted is because it has happened in other parts of the world, in other parts of history, where a technology is being used, and then it's in the archaeological record, it kind of stops for a while, and then it picks back up. This expansion included the region called Micronesia, about 2,000 small islands north of the equator, including Guam, the Marshall Islands, and the Caroline Islands, Palau, etc. So this part here, and this graphic was provided in the article. You guys can have a look at it yourselves. It's been a long mystery what the routes people took to arrive in the region. The revealing of 5 streams of migration into Micronesia helps bring clarity to this mystery. These were key events shaping this region's unique history. Of the 5 detected migrations, 3 were from East Asia. So that's very interesting here. So we have M1, which is migration 1, migration 2. You can see they're going up to Saipan, and here's Guam over here. Migration 4 is a two-pronged migration in which they go to Palau, and then they're going closer into the direction of the Marshall Islands over here in Micronesia. And then you have M5, which is southeast near Vanuatu down here, and they're going up into Micronesia, into all these islands here. So this is, again, it's been long suspected, but now it's confirmed. These migrations from East Asia, probably, more likely than not, probably came from Taiwan Island as a staging point right here, because Taiwan's a pretty large island that's right next to the Chinese mainland. If these people do have the Denisovans marker, it follows that the Denisovans came through from the mainland and then came down in ancient times. And just to give you guys a quick visual here, Denisova Cave is somewhere around in modern day Russia. I don't know exactly, but around here. And they came through the Tibetan Plateau, which is right here. And then they went down into China through Taiwan, and then from there went into Australasia, and now we know these islands here as well, Micronesian islands here as well. You guys can just see it from the map here. Back in the Ice Age, this is Sundaland here. All this was connected as one. So these people, it's not far-fetched at all for them to migrate through here and then get on some boats and go to the islands here. Which is why it wouldn't surprise me if the people that went there, if they found some sort of ancient human that predates these people, these ancestors of the people of the modern day inhabitants of these islands. The Indigenous Ancestry from New Guinea was a major surprise, as a different stream of this migration, one from New Britain, an island chain to the east of New Guinea, was the source of the Papuan ancestry in the Southwest Pacific and in central Micronesia. The researchers also found that present-day indigenous people of the Mariana Islands derive nearly all their pre-European contact ancestry from 2 of the East Asian associated migrations. So that's a big chunk. So these people were essentially East Asians who went to these islands near Saipan and Guam. It's very similar to, if you guys know about the peopling of Japan. The indigenous people of Japan do not look like modern Japanese people. The indigenous people of Japan came through what's assumed to be the Korean peninsula, and they had very Han Chinese like features. So it's very similar story here, according to this study, because he's saying nearly all their ancestry from East Asian associated migrations. It makes them the only people of the open Pacific who lack ancestry from the New Guinea region. and the New Guinea region is here. Obviously, again, this is probably, if I had to guess, this is probably a huge population center in the ancient world. And it stands to reason that these people would go to these islands. I mean, this is within earshot of New Guinea, so it definitely wouldn't surprise me, especially with all the articles that we've gone through on this channel. That's just another pattern that we've seen before. So it's not much of a surprise. This is the fourth publication of original ancient DNA data from remote Pacific islands by Reich's group. So again, the fact that this quintuples the already large database we have of this genetic information just goes to show that there's just so much untapped knowledge that we haven't discovered yet. And I've talked about this on other videos in regards to the people of Australasia and this part of the world. A lot of information can be gleaned from just the oral traditions of the indigenous people that exist there now. And it has come to pass that some of these legends that were told, through oral traditions for who knows how long, they've been exonerated by later research. And I think that's where David Reich that's what David Reich is getting at, because he's not going to stop this research, and he's probably onto. There's probably another paper that's going to come out within probably in a few weeks, as soon as a few weeks, that will add to these types of discoveries. And again, they're building the framework as they go along, because this is like, if you guys want to talk about cutting edge, this is right up there. And some people will criticize it as too conservative, like these estimates, like especially the dates. Oh, it's not ancient enough. But he's writing for Harvard. You should only state, when it comes to academia, you should only state what you can 100% back up with hard evidence, and genetics is that type of evidence. I mean, you can't really argue with it. If something shows up in a group of people's genetics, then it's hard to dispute that. So if he were to purport something like, oh, these people were probably more ancient than what we see here, that just wouldn't fly. So that about does it for this episode. Just one more thing before I end it is the Patreon is back up and running. I get a few requests, and I have been getting requests even when before I took my hiatus. People were always asking how they can support me. And so the Patreon's up, patreon.com/thejindo. Right now there's only one tier offered. It's $5 a month. And that's just general support if you guys if you guys are just looking to help me out. And that'll go to keeping the lights on, coffee, equipment, and stuff like that. So please, if you guys want, definitely you guys can go there. Very easy to remember, and you can subscribe $5 a month to help me out. And if not, cool. So thank you for again joining me for this episode, and I will talk to you guys later.